We're going to be visiting with Kunal Merchant, former aide to Mayor Johnson, very instrumental in his role in keeping the Kings in Sacramento.
Yes.
But closely connected to David Stern.
Very much so. Was a conduit to David here. And really, he doesn't like it when I do it, but the play caller behind the scenes. Yeah. Everyone gets the credit they deserve, but some don't. And that didn't make a lot of sense. Everybody gets the credit they deserve, but some don't. A lot of people have gotten the credit they deserve. Some don't. And Kunal, to me, above all, really, he was the behind-the-scenes guy.
Well, if you and I and Sam, in some sense, have all kind of labeled him as someone that's very intimidating, David Stern, now you're trying to negotiate for a city to keep them here. It does seem like someone that wanted him here.
Right.
But still, those aren't easy conversations to have at all.
Not at all. And Kunal did that along with, obviously, the mayor and the entire team. And really, one thing, a theme we've had with David Stern, something David and Kunal have in common. Both, though short in stature, extremely, extremely effective at their jobs. And he joins us right now, the former chief of staff for Mayor Johnson. Kunal Merchant, Denver Bronco fan, but we won't hold that against him. Hey, buddy.
Hey, good morning, Dave. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Jason's with us, too, Jay Mars. I hope you didn't notice that I got to dig in before we even got you on the phone.
I wouldn't recognize you if you hadn't already done that. That was impressive. That's the fastest you've ever done it, I think.
We're here. We just spoke to Sam Amick. We're spending a lot of time on David Stern. Sam kind of gave us the broad perspective, and we focused a little bit on Sacramento. But as we've talked about, you and the mayor and so many others work very closely with David in bringing this team or keeping this team in Sacramento. I'll just ask you straight out to start, Kunal, when you heard about David's passing, what were the first thoughts that went through your head?
I think I was affected more than I expected, to be honest. I mean, we've known, obviously, for a couple weeks that he had some pretty significant health issues. But, I saw it on Twitter and I started to read some of the homages, and it really hit me. I think he's a transformational figure in the history of sport, and we can talk about all of the things he did that affect society as a whole, but there's a handful of people in this world, and I'm lucky to be among them, who have really personal connections with him, too. I knew him personally and got to, he's a big part of my life, and there's so many little stories that are just about him as a human being, and they were all coming back to me. It was a little overwhelming. I was a little surprised by how much it impacted me. He was a very special person.
So, Kunal, when you think of those, because you do have a different relationship than all of us that kind of see him through maybe a press conference or television or all these tributes, what would it be that you would say about him? What's one of your favorite memories or challenging moments? What is it that you think about with David Stern when you hear his name?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many, and this is a family radio show too. So y'all know what I'm talking about,
right?
But I talked to Marcos too, and I explained to him this is a guy.
Marcos Breton, writer for the Bee. I got to reset that. Go ahead.
Thank you. And he was capable of the greatest compassion you could imagine one human being having for another. Just extraordinary acts of selflessness, and also being just a ruthless, cold-blooded assassin. And often it was in the same sentence. For so many years. He gave tough love to Sacramento. He loved this community. He wanted us to be successful, but we had to earn it. And there were so many calls in the early stages of this where we would have these periodic check-ins with the commissioner, and he'd bring in his lieutenants. And, the mayor is obviously didn't call. I'm in the room, a couple other people, and it's sort of like progress reports to your dad, right? Or progress reports to your tough-minded grandfather or uncle or something. Like, where are you at? What have you done? Where are we at with the arena financing? Where are we at with corporate sponsorships? Where are we at with ownership? And, you could tell he was being super tough on us, and he was very adamant about what we were and weren't doing. But you don't do that unless you really care. And so I think that's the powerful thing about him is he could sound so tough and hard, but you knew that underneath all of that, this is a man who was driven by love of basketball, love of sports, love of what sports can do with society. And it was just a powerful combination to consistently be getting reamed by someone that you just had unbelievable loyalty and love for.
Kunal Merchant, former chief of staff to Mayor Johnson, joining us right now. Kunal, you spoke one time about one of the first presentations the mayor made to the ownership group, and you called it the Galactic Senate, which was so appropriately put. And you talked about how the mayor said, "I am a product of the NBA. I played 12 years for the Suns, and you all taught me about it's what we do after basketball." And he started talking about raising $7 million in a week when the Maloof said this market was dry. And at one point, my favorite part was you relaying that there was a standing over, these owners, there's a ovation when KJ was done making his presentation. Did you get the feeling at the time that the proudest man in the room there was David Stern?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, just to set the scene for folks, you kind of had us at a small table with this U shape in front of us, which was probably at that point at least 15 or 20 of these owners who are all just heavy hitters, and dead center is David Stern, and we just did our best to make the case for Sacramento. This is back in 2011 when the threat was to go to Anaheim, and we needed to prove that we were in the game and we could come up with an arena plan. And, Mayor Johnson that was one of his most eloquent moments I think I've ever seen. And he spoke from the heart without notes and just said, "Look, I'm a product of your association." And all of the owners stood up. If I remember correctly, I don't think the commissioner did, though. He kind of sat back in his seat with his arms crossed and had this very small smile. And I think that was a lot of pride in him, because obviously he was proud of us as Sacramentans for doing well and coming prepared to that presentation. But I think he was proud of the mayor in particular, seeing him as one of the folks who went on a journey through the NBA, and to see his journey, to see him rise to the moment was, I think, very personally meaningful for the commissioner as well.
And this is just awesome to hear the story. I mean, the inner workings, and then at moments when, I don't know, if you had close times with him, how, I guess the way I want to word this, how tenuous was this for Sacramento? It felt like he was always kind of rooting for the Kings to stay here, and we know the realistic chances of them leaving were so much there. But with him behind Sacramento, how much faith do you have in him and in you guys to pull this all through?
I mean, I always felt like the commissioner was going to give Sacramento a fair shake, which typically doesn't happen. If you think about all these situations where cities get leveraged, and we have some just down the street in Northern California, is not always a fair process. And we always had confidence that David Stern was going to respect Sacramento and give us a shot. But in our efforts today and in the next few days to really lionize him, let's be clear: the man was a fiduciary for the association, and if Sacramento didn't produce, he wasn't going to do this because he was nice. So I saw yesterday we're kind of referring to him as Superman. I would say he's more like Morpheus from the Matrix.
Right.
And Sacramento was Neo, right? Like, he had complete mastery over everything. And it was us. He saw something in us that we maybe didn't see in ourselves. And he was going to be helpful and guide us on that journey. But we had to do the journey. We had to fight. We had to be the ones that took the pill and stood up and did what we needed to do. So that's kind of how I saw it. But I always felt like he was always going to do right by us. And I think most powerfully, he was so old school. Even though he's so innovative and did all these things to bring the sport into the new age, he was old school in the sense that words matter, deeds matter, word is bond. And so when Sacramento did what we said again and again and again, I think that hit him in the core of who he was as a person, and said, these folks are delivering on what we've asked them to do, and that just has to matter.
He's a 5'7" New York lawyer, but do you think deep down inside I speculated on this earlier, his passion for the game ran through the small markets, the Sacramentos, the flyover states, that he realized what Madison Square Garden in LA and Boston meant, but you always felt like he maybe because he was a small guy, maybe because he'd been bullied. I don't know, but there's got to be some sort of psychological connection between David Stern and standing up for the little guy.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I can't speak to his psychology, but I think I take it even one step more profound than that. I think he saw the business value in being loyal to markets that are loyal to the NBA. Mm-hmm. When we went into the Board of Governors and said, you have 100% market share of Sacramento. You're the only game in town. You are the professional sports league. You've been here for 26 years. We've sold out 19 of those 26 years, and we only made the playoffs in 7 of those years. He saw the business value to the NBA of being the sport on the front page of the sports section and not the fourth or sixth sport in a market. So, of course, he cared about big markets. Those are the temples of the league. And, of course, there was probably a little bit of that David and Goliath, no pun intended, with the smaller markets. But I think it was business, too. He saw that Sacramento was good business for the NBA. And, to the credit of our fans and our community and the ownership of the Kings, everybody, that we've proven that again, even in this new era of our organization.
So, Kunal, when this was all now finalized, the Kings are staying, the arena's built, he comes out for kind of David J. Stern walk, that presentation for him. Everybody has a vision. Did he kind of say, yeah, this is pretty amazing, maybe even bigger and better than I thought? Do you remember any reflections then from him when he came back out after everything was finalized?
I do. I mean, he was a little bit older, a little bit slower than his prime, but you could tell he was positively thrilled and was just joyous in his demeanor and affect. But what was really cool is there was a couple minutes where we're waiting for the press conference to start. I'm standing there with him and Cage and a couple others, and all of the questions that he's asking about the Golden One Center, they're not about basketball. He's not asking about scoreboards or locker rooms or that. He was asking about the economic and civic impact of the arena to the broader community of Sacramento. And I just thought that was so cool. He's the commissioner of the basketball league, but he was most proud that this facility was doing good in terms of creating jobs and bringing, revenue and opportunity to the community. And I just thought that settled everything about the statesmanship that David Stern brought to the table as a commissioner of a major sports league.
I think I remember with all the back and forth you guys had, in the end, had formed a tremendous working relationship. And I think it was Marcos' article yesterday, Marcos Bertone of the Bee, excuse me, that was describing the Tribeca 30 for 30 premiere we were at. David Stern was there with his wife. And then at the end of the night, I just thought this was kind of a cute little touch on it. At the end of the night, he didn't want to stick around for all the partying. So he and his wife are leaving and looked kind of lost out front there. And you were the one that got them out, kind of escorted them out to the car and tucked them in, closed the door and all that. And almost, as I said before, whether it was guys like you or Ben Gumpert or Chris Granger and Amy Brooks, talking about the people that we have some sort of connection to in Sacramento that have had the chance to work with David, whichever side you were on, there was almost like a cult of David Stern, a worship, and such a tremendous amount of respect.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I had actually forgotten that detail. Marcos reminded me of it, and I don't really have words. I mean, he's a special person. I would do that for anybody, but I was lucky enough to be able to help him out. And I think it's just emblematic of who he was. There's this big celebratory moment, and he's content to kind of just, take the side exit and let that moment live without him having to be front and center. You got to remember, when he would go to basketball games, he didn't sit in the front row.
Right.
At least in Sacramento, he would always be 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 rows behind, seeing it from the fans' point of view. And for this guy got the spotlight. He could command it like few people on this earth, but he was just as content sometimes to let the moment be without him. And I just think that's a mark of just an exceptional person, an exceptional leader.
We're out of time. Last question for you. It was 22-8. Who are the 8 no votes?
Yeah, right. I'm not going to do all of that.
What if we did like a rhyme thing where like
he would if I did that, David would strike lightning on me. I'm sure he got the things up there.
Always good hearing stories, my man. Seriously, and we don't say it enough. Thanks for all you did.
Yes,
and thank you for sharing some of your stories about a man that we all miss very, very much.
Of course. All right. Take care, guys.
All right. Take
care.
All right.
Thank you. That's Kunal Merchant.
The Drive.